already the filibuster. Well, is there going to be one at Parliament today to presage a budget on Thursday that is meant to be essentially an austerity budget because we've run out of money, or rather we've run out of your and my taxation income to be able to pay for everything that the government wants to pay for. So, but will actually the budget happen on Thursday? There is a suggestion this morning and, well, last night and yesterday and over the weekend that the extraordinary decision of the Speaker, Jerry Brownlee, to allow 123 members of Parliament each the right to speak on the debate as to whether Te Pāti Māori should be excluded from the chamber for a period of time in punishment for their actions and transgressions against House protocol and common sense and decency and all those other things. That debate will be allowed to be involve 123 MPs, and should there be an amendment, like, for example, no, we shouldn't be suspended from, oh, I don't know, 3 weeks as suggested at the moment, but 3 days, then they can all speak again. I know. How bloody ridiculous. The suggestion is that there will be, as I talk to you now, the gathering of folk who probably don't have a job, or if they do have a job, it's paid for through some sort of slush public fund. They will be gathering on the forecourt of Parliament to protest against what has already been perceived by Television New Zealand and Radio New Zealand, but particularly by Radio New Zealand, is out and out racism. Maori are an endangered species in this country. If I was to take just a representative sampling, if I just arrived from, oh, I don't know, another country or outer space or somewhere not New Zealand, and I'd relied upon the state broadcaster for my understanding, I should be able to trust the state broadcaster, shouldn't I? I live in a democracy, Western world, relatively educated, literate. No, I should be all right. And if I was to rely upon the news bulletins of Radio New Zealand, the commentary, in particular, TVNZ is my secondary, but I've already heard it on Radio New Zealand, so I just get the pictures with TVNZ. I would believe that there was about to occur today the most heinous form of overt racism since, oh, I don't know, Parihaka. That this was essentially the silencing of brown people in this country, particularly Indigenous brown people in this country, because, well, just because we didn't like them. And we're instituting a form of democratic slavery against them as a consequence of seeking to exclude them from august and important meetings of the House, even though they had been democratically and purposefully elected to that particular position. Now, I'm not relying upon my background. I'm just relying upon the general tenor, the commentary, the people that are being interviewed by Radio New Zealand at the moment, news over the last 24 hours. And I would believe that if I was to believe solely Radio New Zealand, some great calumny was at hand. There was, as I said, some great discriminatory practice about to be practiced, and that the voice of the Indigenous folk of this country was to be purged from the representative assembly of all New Zealanders. I know. Now that's not going to happen. We know that, but yes, that's the line that Radio New Zealand, the state broadcaster, funded, I think, annually by us to the tune of roughly $65 to $70 million a year. We've bailed them out in previous years as well. Essentially a haven for the liberal left of this country, and I have to say more left than liberal, to be honest with you. If I was to listen to them, our state-funded broadcaster, I would believe that this is the most racist, discriminatory, and frankly appalling government, very possibly, obviously the century, but very possibly over the last two. And that you'd have to go back to, oh, I don't know, Governor Grey and colonial times to find, of the 19th century, to find anything that could be roughly its equivalent. Can I say, today we will have that kind of charade played out. I'm sure that much of the rhetoric that I've already used this morning will be employed by the Green Party or Te Pāti Māori as they protest, and various speakers, I guess, in the Labour Party, as they protest against the severity of the punishment that is to be visited upon 3 members of Te Pāti Māori for engaging in the most obvious and intimidatory behaviour, of which we all said it ourselves, don't need to go over it. There's no question it was. Even Chris Hipkins, the leader of the opposition and the Labour Party, concedes that the action was unstatesmanlike, impolitic, could be construed as confronting and intimidating. Even the leader of the opposition concerns that, or confirms that. The issue really is what's the nature of the punishment. Now, the irony here too is that the parliamentarians of Te Pāti Māori have been missing from action in the House for not just days and weeks, but months and years. They have regarded the House as somewhere where they go to do their latest bit of guerrilla theatre. I've never quite worked out if that's guerrilla as in the shaven one, or guerrilla as in the sort of rebel movement. Anyhow, with Te Pāti Māori, but they're going to go there and do their guerrilla theatre, and then they decamp again on the taxpayer, thanks very much. And they travel around the country. They've got the highest travel bills of any members of Parliament, and they routinely pop across to, I don't know, places like Rarotonga and places like that to go and catch up with their whānau and the wider relatives and anybody else that might support them. They spend so little time in Parliament, they may as well not be there. So if they are going to be suspended for 3 weeks, it's not that anybody will miss them. It is simply that they won't get paid for that 3 weeks. I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, though, but if I was to offer this thought, it is this. It is a significant and a severe punishment to restrict the right of elected representatives to appear in the House of Representatives. That is, by its nature, clearly anti-democratic. You should be there if you are elected to serve and you are given the power and authority of your constituency or of your, if you like, your position, as determined by the electors of this country. I think that goes without saying. So not to be there, you have got to have done something significantly wrong. And as somebody who himself was suspended from Parliament, I suppose without pay, for 24 or 48 hours, I can't work out which it was, and I can, with some degree of authority, say to you that I know what it's like not to be there. Mind you, in my particular case, I was enormously thankful because I got to see a representative rugby match in which my beloved Hawke's Bay was playing. But anyhow, the reality is that all I did to get suspended for, I can't quite sure if it's 24 or 48 hours, was call Richard Prebble a liar, which he was, and suggest that he was telling untruths in the House, and I refused to withdraw my commentary because it was true. All right, so I was suspended. I didn't march across the House in the middle of a vote of the House on a bill, controversial as it might have been, and then place myself, probably about 1.5 meters from the object of my contempt and express my contempt in the most violent and intimidatory of fashion. When is a haka not a haka? Well, there you go. That was an old-fashioned haka. That was a haka that warring parties might give to each other just before they attack and attempt to kill the person that they are. And there's no question that in the gestures and in the loaded gun that Debbie Narewa Packer brought in her hand, and in the see you next Tuesday comments of Rari Waititi, that the Maori Party loathe David Seymour and the ACT Party in a way that would be not out of place in the musket wars of the 1830s, and the hatred and contempt. And so that was expressed in that haka. It wasn't a display of tikanga any more than, oh, I don't know, a European knocking their next door neighbour over the head with a mallet because they get into some argument is an example of tikanga. It is just an example of rage, of upset, of contempt, of hatred. And it was viscerally exploited in the House on that particular day. Now the question, so there is no question that it is deserving of punishment. The punishment, the Privileges Committee decided 3 weeks. Is that too long? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's 3 weeks or 3 days or 3 hours. It really doesn't matter. The issue is a group of members of Parliament who not only performed that particular deed, but then refused on repeated occasions to appear before the authority that governs them and explain their actions. All right? So it wasn't that you simply were charged with this intimidatory and violent behaviour. It's that you refused to go to the parliamentary court, if you like, to explain or at least defend your actions. They did not. Why didn't they go? Oh, they didn't like the timing. Oh, you're not going to recognise our tikanga. Oh, some of the evidence that we want to give you're not going to listen to, so bugger you, we're not going. Although they did then send a written submission and threaten to sick former, I think that's the proper word too, to sick former Attorney General and former National Cabinet Minister Chris Finlayson KC onto the Privileges Committee should they have the temerity to meet without the consent of the Te Pāti Māori principles. It's an absurd case, really. I mean, even that I'm talking about, it's absurd. But it is going to potentially dominate all of the parliamentary sitting today, and particularly, it could potentially dominate Wednesday and Thursday as well, should the filibuster occur. It can last forever. Well, until 123 MPs, time 123 times 123. I mean, at worst possible scenario, which won't happen, but to give you an example of the stupid decision by Speaker Jerry Brownlee to prolong this farce. But there you go. That's the nature of the beast. I welcome your thoughts on that one this morning, but I think the punishment is not only fair, but it is, and deserved, obviously, but it is inevitable if you decide that you are the authority and that the institution or the august House of Representatives that you asked to be elected to, or you chose to stand, and now you are a member of, you decide not to be bound by the most basic of its rules and its decorum. Good luck on that. Your thoughts?